The world is not what it seems. Every belief held sacred, every comfort relied upon. Every illusion of security conceals an undercurrent of harsh reality. Most people live their lives shielding themselves from this realization, clinging to what feels familiar, never questioning the foundations of their existence. Nietzsche called this resistance to clarity a silent imprisonment. The very truths that could liberate the mind have the power to crush the soul if confronted unprepared. There is a paradox at the core of human consciousness. Truth can awaken, yet it can also devastate. Consider the individual who has built a life around principles handed down from society, culture, or family. Loyalty, morality, and ethics are treated as shields, yet they rarely offer protection against the raw currents of reality. Every act rooted in assumed fairness, every expectation of reciprocity, exposes a person to disappointment. The moment the world fails to align with their moral framework, the shock is unbearable. The spirit is shaken, the mind recoils, and the sense of meaning crumbles. Nietzsche observed that the courage to face truth is a rare quality because it demands more than intellect. It requires resilience that few cultivate. Take the case of a scholar devoted to uncovering knowledge and exposing deceit. He has spent years pursuing clarity, believing that insight grants control and understanding ensures safety. One day, he confronts evidence of human betrayal, moral corruption, and systemic injustice on a scale previously unrecognized. The realization does not empower him. It unsettles him. His foundations of security, trust, and purpose fracture under the weight of unfiltered reality. Nietzsche would say that the spirit, untempered by the capacity to endure discomfort, can collapse when confronted with absolute truth. Human beings are constructed to seek patterns, to impose meaning, and to avoid chaos. The intellect thrives on comprehension, yet reality is often chaotic, indifferent, and cruel. When truth pierces illusions too abruptly, the mind struggles to integrate it. Emotional equilibrium fails, psychological stability weakens, and existential despair emerges. Nietzsche's philosophy emphasizes that those unprepared for the consequences of clarity may not survive it emotionally. Knowledge becomes a weapon rather than a tool. It illuminates, yet simultaneously inflicts damage. Consider a young woman navigating relationships with trust and expectation. She believes kindness guarantees loyalty and honesty will yield respect. She encounters betrayal from someone she revered, and the layers of assumption built over years collapse instantly. The shock is not merely social, it is psychological. Her understanding of human nature, once a framework of security, is revealed to be incomplete, naive, and dangerously fragile. Nietzsche warned that confronting such truths without inner fortitude destabilizes the self. The spirit is tested, and many are broken before they awaken. Truth is not inherently destructive. It becomes dangerous when the observer lacks preparation, experience, or perspective. Most approaches to life are defensive rather than proactive. People absorb fragments of knowledge, yet avoid examining the foundations of their beliefs. When the full scope of reality emerges, when illusions shatter, the consequences are not merely intellectual, they are deeply personal. The collapse of perceived order evokes panic, regret, and existential doubt. Nietzsche's hidden truth lies in the intersection of knowledge and vulnerability. Understanding can liberate only if the spirit is capable of enduring it. Consider the psychological mechanism behind denial. Denial is not stupidity, it is self-preservation. The mind constructs barriers to shield the psyche from truths too painful to confront. These barriers maintain stability, offering the illusion of safety. The moment a barrier fails, when reality penetrates defenses, the ensuing impact can be catastrophic. Life, stripped of comforting narratives, forces the individual to confront their own insignificance, limitations, and mortality. The truth does not merely inform, it exposes, and exposure can annihilate the unprepared spirit. A man devoted to moral rectitude spends his life believing justice governs human interaction. He expects fairness, reciprocity, and recognition. Then he witnesses deceit, corruption, and cruelty without consequence. The dissonance between belief and experience produces cognitive turbulence. His moral framework no longer functions as a guide, but becomes a source of pain. Nietzsche observed that such collapses are inevitable when truth conflicts with long-held illusions. The mind, unpracticed in resilience, experiences what might be called spiritual fracture, a weakening of will, purpose, and trust in life itself. The consequences extend beyond isolated incidents. Individuals who encounter harsh truths prematurely or unprepared often develop patterns of withdrawal, cynicism, or obsessive rationalization. Emotional responses are dulled, relationships strained, and decision-making impaired. Nietzsche identified this as a common trajectory. The confrontation with reality without the cultivation of internal strength generates psychological scars. Awareness alone is insufficient. Endurance is required. The human psyche can comprehend abstract truths, but integrating them without fragmentation is a challenge few master. Consider the artist who seeks authenticity through creativity. Exposure to the world's cruelty, injustice, and hypocrisy challenges every assumption underpinning their expression. The resulting tension may either catalyze a profound transformation or induce paralysis. The difference lies in preparation. The spirit must learn to face ambiguity, accept discomfort, and endure existential turbulence. Nietzsche's hidden truth is that clarity without preparation can destroy not merely hope, but the foundational trust in oneself. Fear amplifies the destructive potential of truth. When the mind perceives danger, betrayal, or existential inadequacy, it reacts with heightened emotional intensity. Heart rate accelerates, stress hormones surge, and reasoning becomes clouded. Even truths that could serve as instruments of growth inflict pain if received unprepared. Nietzsche's philosophy emphasizes the duality of enlightenment. Knowledge has the power to both liberate and devastate. The human spirit, unconditioned for endurance, risks collapse. Now, consider the subtle cumulative effect. Life presents truths incrementally: betrayals, failures, systemic injustices, personal inadequacies. Each layer erodes previous assumptions. Most individuals operate in a state of partial awareness, navigating the world with incomplete understanding. When cumulative clarity arrives, the shock is exponentially greater than any single revelation. Nietzsche's insight is that preparation, reflection, and fortitude are necessary to absorb the full spectrum of reality without annihilation. The untrained spirit is fragile. Repeated exposure can corrode identity, optimism, and purpose. Even societal and cultural narratives contribute to this vulnerability. Humans are encouraged to believe in justice, kindness, and meritocracy. These stories provide structure, yet they can intensify the devastation when shattered. The alignment between expectation and reality becomes a measure of disillusionment. Nietzsche recognized that most people are unprepared for the disparity. The awakening to harsh truth is rarely gradual. It strikes with the full weight of contrast, exposing the fragility of previously untested beliefs. Let us examine a real psychological pattern. Those raised in environments that reward conformity, obedience, or moral rigidity often experience amplified trauma when confronted with unfiltered truth. Beliefs built on assumption become fragile under scrutiny. Exposure to betrayal, corruption, or existential ambiguity produces emotional overload. The mind struggles to integrate these revelations, and the spirit can fracture under pressure. Nietzsche's philosophy suggests that spiritual endurance is cultivated through confrontation, reflection, and disciplined self-awareness. The lack of such preparation increases vulnerability exponentially. Truth has another dimension. It is isolating. Recognizing reality as it is often separates the individual from collective comfort. Friends, family, and community may continue to operate under illusions. The person who sees clearly may experience alienation, misunderstanding, or ridicule. This social isolation compounds the psychological weight of clarity. Nietzsche argued that those who perceive reality deeply must cultivate internal resilience precisely because external support is often absent. The spirit must become self-sufficient, capable of sustaining itself under scrutiny and uncertainty. The hidden danger lies not in truth itself, but in unprepared confrontation. Knowledge, when untempered, destabilizes the psyche. The collapse of comforting frameworks, the exposure to cruelty, and the confrontation with mortality combine to threaten emotional equilibrium. Nietzsche's silent lesson is that awareness is a double-edged sword. Enlightenment can liberate or destroy. Preparation, fortitude, and deliberate cultivation of inner strength determine which path the individual will traverse. Confronting truth requires courage unlike any other. The human mind often recoils, not because reality is inherently unbearable, but because the spirit has been conditioned to rely on comforting illusions. When these illusions collapse, emotional equilibrium is challenged. Nietzsche emphasized that clarity is a responsibility. Those unwilling to endure it remain trapped in delusion, while those who accept it are tasked with the challenge of reconstructing meaning on a foundation forged through confrontation and resilience. A professional who has relied on certainty for decades may suddenly face evidence that everything assumed about their career, colleagues, or industry is false or misleading. Trust erodes, confidence wavers, and purpose falters. The immediate reaction is often panic or despair. Without preparation, the mind experiences destabilization at its core. Nietzsche noted that such moments, when truth pierces the familiar, are tests of psychological endurance. The collapse is not failure. It is an opportunity to rebuild with insight, if one can withstand the initial shock. Consider the psychological impact on relationships. A person who believes in absolute loyalty and fairness may encounter betrayal from a close friend or partner. The rupture is not merely emotional. It shakes the very framework through which they interpret human behavior. The devastation is compounded by years of untested assumptions. Nietzsche's observation is subtle yet profound. Exposure to the full scope of human reality often produces a rupture between expectation and experience, leaving the spirit vulnerable to despair unless it develops an inner capacity for endurance. Truth also challenges identity. When deeply held beliefs crumble, the self is forced to confront its limitations, mistakes, and biases. A scientist, for example, may discover ethical compromises in a revered institution. A parent may recognize that their child's development is shaped as much by societal structures as personal guidance. A political activist may uncover hidden agendas undermining their cause. These revelations force a reckoning. Who am I if the reality I depended on is fractured? Nietzsche's hidden truth is that identity is not fixed. It is a construct vulnerable to collapse when confronted with unflinching reality. The mind that has relied on comforting narratives may resist change, yet resistance is temporary. Reality persists. Every attempt to suppress it only prolongs suffering. The confrontation with truth is inevitable. Avoidance delays the inevitable but magnifies its impact. Nietzsche would argue that embracing reality, even in its harshest form, allows reconstruction on a basis that is resilient, self-aware, and authentic. Avoidance preserves comfort but weakens the spirit, while confrontation cultivates strength at the cost of initial pain. Consider the artist whose creative vision is challenged by reality. Exposure to criticism, rejection, and societal indifference may initially paralyze expression. The mind recoils from the truth that excellence and recognition are not guaranteed, that talent alone is insufficient to shape impact. Yet those who persist, who endure the discomfort of awareness and rejection, gradually transform fragility into insight. Nietzsche emphasized that the destructive force of truth can be channeled to refine the spirit rather than annihilate it. The key is integration, confronting reality with awareness, and allowing it to reshape understanding rather than destroy hope. Human suffering is amplified by expectation. The person who believes that life should be fair, that morality guarantees reward, or that effort ensures recognition is especially vulnerable to devastation when confronted with harsh truth. Betrayal, inequity, and failure are not anomalies, they are constants in an indifferent universe. Nietzsche's perspective was stark. Those unprepared to integrate this understanding risk spiritual collapse. The challenge is to cultivate awareness without surrendering to nihilism, to accept reality without abandoning purpose, and to endure suffering without losing self-direction. The destructive impact of truth is also psychological. Repeated exposure to betrayal, systemic injustice, or personal failure erodes trust, optimism, and motivation. Emotional resilience declines. Without conscious effort, clarity becomes paralysis. Nietzsche recognized that the capacity to endure insight is not innate. It is cultivated through deliberate confrontation with discomfort, reflection, and disciplined thought. Awareness without resilience is dangerous, because the mind unpracticed in endurance experiences despair as an inevitable consequence of clarity. Consider a young professional who discovers the fragility of the corporate environment. Years of dedication are met with manipulation, inequity, and exploitation. The reality does not align with expectation, and the resulting shock destabilizes identity, ambition, and motivation. Nietzsche would say that the unprepared spirit suffers a near collapse because the framework through which meaning was constructed is exposed as insufficient. Recovery requires deliberate engagement, reflection, and the restructuring of understanding. The mind must transform disillusionment into insight, vulnerability into strategy, and despair into clarity. The cumulative effect of confronting reality is profound. Each revelation compounds prior instability. The individual who has relied on illusions for decades may experience an avalanche of psychological impact, moral dissonance, existential anxiety, and erosion of identity. Nietzsche's hidden truth is that endurance is not optional, it is essential. The spirit must learn to integrate repeated exposure to harsh realities while maintaining functional coherence, psychological stability, and purpose. Those who fail to cultivate resilience succumb to despair. Those who succeed transform clarity into empowerment. Truth also demands solitude. Recognition of reality often separates individuals from the comfort of collective delusion. Friends, family, and society may cling to illusions, rejecting those who confront them. Alienation accompanies insight. Nietzsche asserted that liberation comes at the cost of isolation because social reinforcement of illusion is pervasive. The awakened individual must rely on internal fortitude, self-validation, and disciplined reasoning. Psychological independence becomes a prerequisite for surviving the destructive potential of truth. The individual who navigates life with untempered trust, unquestioned morality, and untested assumptions is particularly vulnerable. Betrayal, failure, and exposure are inevitable, and the resulting impact on the spirit is magnified. Nietzsche highlighted that preparation is essential. Resilience, perspective, and disciplined reflection serve as buffers against the destructive potential of reality. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Endurance, adaptation, and self-sufficiency determine whether truth liberates or destroys. Consider a philosopher who dedicates life to studying ethics and human behavior. Confronted with evidence of systemic corruption, manipulation, and moral compromise, the framework within which they interpret the world collapses. Their intellect grasps the facts, but their spirit falters under the weight of realization. Nietzsche emphasized that the mind capable of comprehension may not be capable of integration without cultivation of resilience. Understanding can devastate without the scaffolding of psychological fortitude. Ultimately, the human mind must learn to confront reality incrementally, cultivating endurance, self-reflection, and independence. Acceptance of truth is not passive, it is an active engagement. The destructive power of clarity can be redirected into growth, insight, and empowerment if the individual embraces responsibility, cultivates resilience, and reconstructs purpose on the foundation of awareness. Nietzsche's hidden truth is stark yet liberating. Devastation is possible, but so is transformation. The cost of avoidance is stagnation, the cost of confrontation is challenge, but also awakening. Every encounter with unfiltered reality is a test of strength. Betrayal, moral ambiguity, mortality, and existential uncertainty are constants. The unprepared mind fractures under exposure. The prepared mind integrates, adapts, and evolves. Nietzsche's philosophy illuminates the path. Clarity must be paired with resilience. Insight must coexist with emotional endurance, and truth must be confronted courageously to prevent it from destroying the spirit. Avoidance preserves temporary comfort, but guarantees eventual fragility. Confrontation cultivates authentic strength, allowing the individual to endure, act, and influence with awareness. In conclusion, the human spirit is fragile, and clarity can be devastating. Exposure to unfiltered truth challenges every assumption, belief, and expectation. The unprepared are shattered, the prepared endure. Nietzsche's hidden truth is uncompromising. The mind that fails to cultivate resilience in the face of reality risks annihilation of spirit. Yet the same confrontation can awaken profound understanding, purpose, and strength. The journey is perilous, isolating, and relentless, but it is the only path to authentic existence. The choice is stark: continue in comforting illusion, or confront reality with courage. Each revelation offers potential for growth or destruction. Every act of reflection, every deliberate confrontation with truth, strengthens resilience. Nietzsche's lesson endures: life is neither fair nor predictable, but those who cultivate endurance, insight, and self-reliance can withstand the destructive force of truth and emerge transformed. The spirit, once shattered, can be rebuilt, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with reality than ever before.